Okay. In the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit, Amen. Welcome everyone this evening to our 17th annual Lenten Lecture Series, Wednesday evenings in this year of 2018. Our theme is what we call virtual pilgrimage, and as our introduction states, the pilgrim is not only an early settler from England to North America, but for 2,000 years, pilgrims have journeyed to the most holy city of Jerusalem and its environs. Building on previous presentations about significant destinations in the Holy Land, I, Father Richard Demetrius Andrews, will continue to share the sights, sounds, and history of this special place from our recent trip this past fall of 2017. And this includes several sites in Jerusalem, Bethlehem, Nazareth, Galilee, and finally we will talk about our trip to St. Petersburg in Russia. And if you have not yet been in the Holy Land, hopefully this will be the next best thing. Last week was our first Wednesday, first topic, when we covered the Patriarchate of Jerusalem and also the Church of St. Peter Galilee. And just as a footnote, I did do the research about the weather vane. Remember we talked about the weather vane and the rooster, and wouldn't be anything abnormal for us to look at a weather vane at a farm in the Midwest and see a rooster on top. And that's what we see, the rooster on the cross, which kind of looks like a weather vane on top of the Church of St. Peter Galilee. So I looked up the history there, and Pope Gregory I, who was in the 6th century, said that the rooster was the most suitable emblem of Christianity, being the emblem of St. Peter the Apostle. And as a result of this, the rooster gradually began to be used as a weather vane on church steeples. And in the 9th century, Pope Nicholas I ordered the figure to be placed on every church steeple. So it does have a religious origin. Tonight we're going to be talking about the Garden of Gethsemane, the Stations of the Cross, and the Praetorium, the Prison of Christ, which are all also in Jerusalem. And so just to help orient us, I did this in our presentation back in December, but just to help us, in case we don't know geographically where Jerusalem is, this of course is the Mediterranean Sea, Europe, see Spain and France, see North Africa below, Turkey, Greece, and here on the eastern side of the Mediterranean we have Syria, Jordan, and Israel, a very tiny country here, and then you see Jerusalem there. And then if you go in a little farther, you're looking at the country of Israel here, along with Palestine, the West Bank, and Gaza. And you see how Jerusalem is kind of situated in between. You go even a little closer, this is the city of Jerusalem. I didn't show this to you last week, because last week I wasn't as prepared as I wanted to be. But this is kind of a close-up of the city of Jerusalem. And this, you can see the outline in red here. This is the Old City, okay? And the Old City is marked by fortress walls. Very clearly you can tell what is the Old City. It's surrounded by fortress walls that are attributed to one of the Turkish rulers, one of the sultans in the medieval ages. There was an even older city, which is smaller than this, but it's not outlined on this map. Now, if you look here, you can kind of see the Holy Sepulchre is here, the Dome of the Rock is here, the Al-Aqsa Mosque is here, this red area here is the Temple Mount. So we talked about the Sepulchre in the December presentation, and the Patriarchate is virtually right next to the Sepulchre. And then we also talked about the Church of St. Peter Gallicantu, which is down here. It's actually outside of the old city. Today, excuse me, we're going to be talking tonight about the Garden of Gethsemane, which is really just kind of at the foot of the hill outside of the Dome of the Rock, outside of the old city, outside the walls. You see it right in this area here. This is the Garden of Gethsemane. And then we will talk about the Stations of the Cross, which run through the old city. And then finally we'll talk about the Praetorium, which is kind of part of the Via Dolorosa, the Way of Sorrow, where the Stations of the Cross are. Now, just to help further orient you, this between, the Holy Sepulchre is near the top of Jerusalem's kind of on a hill. So the center of the old city is kind of the highest point. And then so you go down here, you're kind of going down into a valley. The Kidron Valley is here, and the Mount of Olives is over here on the other. So it's a valley in this area, and then it's another mount on this side. So it kind of helps orient you to some things. We'll talk more as we continue to go through our sites in the coming weeks. We'll orient you further. So let's talk about Gethsemane. I'm going to get out of this area and go to another one. So here we go. So a lot of the signs, if you will, in the old city in Jerusalem are written in Latin, because remember many of the Crusaders were from the Western Roman Empire, probably spoke Latin or knew Latin, and they were the ones that established a foothold in the Holy Land after some of the first Muslim conquests, and continued to do so. So if things aren't in Greek, they're often in Latin, if not Hebrew. So this sign says Hortis Gethsemane, the Garden of Gethsemane. That's where, of course, where the word horticulture comes from, right? So, remember I told you about the Mount of Olives on Arch? I'm going to kind of show you these photos in the order that we saw them. In other words, what we saw, the sites, how we saw them, how we came upon them. So we were on the Mount of Olives before we went to the Garden of Gethsemane. So we descended from the mount, walked down the valley, came to the Church of St. Mary Magdalene, which is a Russian Orthodox monastery. And then further down, you come to the Garden of Gethsemane at the bottom of the valley. So these are the walls outside, and you see some of the beautiful, colorful plants and flowers. And you see in the background there the old city walls and the Dome of the Rock, which is one of the third most revered holy site in Islam. And then this would be looking on one side of the street to your left, this would be looking to the other side of the street on your right. And then you come here to the garden, and of course the famous words as Jesus prayed in the garden, "My Father, if it be possible, let this cup pass from me, nevertheless not as I will, but as you will." And then you're in the garden. The garden has numerous olive trees and some paths. It probably wasn't looking this organized at the time of Jesus being there, but some of the trees, the olive trees, are still there is one there that is considered to be the tree where Jesus prayed. So olive trees are very old there. There's another view. Another view. And then so we kind of came around the outside of the garden and then came in next to the church the Church of All Nations, which is a Catholic church which is built on the site of Garden of Gethsemane. So you're kind of looking at the side of the church there, and you're looking at one of the oldest trees there in front of you. Now I'm going to show you later, because we saw it later, that area directly in front of you, it looks like a little doorway, but it's actually a window. And you'll see the significance in just a moment. This is kind of another view. You're still looking at the side of the church there. And another view of the garden. And again, you can see how big the trunks are, and how old the tree is. Again, the side of the church. Close-up of the older trees, one of the trees. This is looking from the garden towards the wall of the old city. And it's looking kind of, to the south. And in the middle you see the Dome of the Rock there. And then again, Dome of the Rock. This is the old East Gate, the gate that in the scriptures says it'll be closed and will remain closed until the Lord's second coming. So that gate is, you can tell it's stone. It's bricked up or stoned in, but it's no longer passable. Another close-up. You can see at the top of the wall there the little, I forget what you call them, but they're basically, in the medieval times when they had arrows and that the soldiers would stand in those areas and they could shoot in between in the openings and be protected by the rest of the wall. So this is quite, so it's and there's a walkway on the top of the wall. And there's, at least for quite a bit of part of the old city, you can walk that walkway along the top of the wall. I don't know if you can notice at the top of the East Gate, you can see some guard towers up there, here and here. More than likely, Israeli police or military would be staffing those types of places. So, okay, so this is so you're looking across the way up to the old city wall, turn around, and now you're looking at the front of the church. And then most of the shots of the front of the church are very close because there's a street that runs right in front, so it's not like you could walk, kind of get out away from it and get a nice picture of the church from a little bit farther away. So these are kind of close up, and you're kind of looking at them.
Father, is this the Russian church you were referring to?
No, this is the Catholic Church of All Nations, built over the site of the Garden of Gethsemane. So you see that it's difficult to see because of the angle, but this is a big mosaic on top of Jesus praying in the garden and the disciples around him sleeping.
Is that all mosaic?
Yes, it's all mosaic tile. If you notice at the very top, there's elk at the top, and I forgot to look up the significance of the elk. I'll have to hopefully remember to do that for next time. Another view. And then this banner on the left here, on the lower part, it says 800. When we were there this year of 2017 was the 800th anniversary of I believe the Franciscans being in the Holy Land. The Catholic order they're kind of considered to be the protectors, the Catholic protectors of the Holy Land. And Holy Land in Latin is terra sancta. Sancta, holy, terra, land like terrestrial. You see a close-up there of the statues at the top and the front of the church. Another view. And then this is the other side of the church. So before you were looking at the left side or north side of the church, now you're looking on the south side of the church. And then up the hill would be towards the Mount of Olives. Now you go in the church, and it's very beautiful. Most of the ceiling is mosaic tile. And you can see the beautiful marble pillars and kind of a Corinthian style capital on top of the columns. Very beautifully ornately decorated church. A close up here, you see Jesus praying. Notice it's a rock. You know, nobody, people when they think of a garden, they don't think of a rock, right? But this is the icon here. He's praying on the rock in the Garden of Gethsemane. That's significant. And then, of course, this is his betrayal and arrest. This is looking up at the ceiling. You can get an idea of the ornate decoration. Close up. A little farther away. It's kind of a view of the apse behind the altar with Jesus praying and the dome up above.
Do you know when it was decorated?
I don't, but here I'll just read real quick a little something about the Church of All Nations, also known as the Church of the Basilica of the Agony. A Roman Catholic Church located on the Mount of Olives in Jerusalem, really at the base of the Mount of Olives, next to the Garden of Gethsemane. Enshrines a section of bedrock where Jesus is said to have prayed before his arrest. The current church rests on the foundations of two earlier ones, that of a small 12th century Crusader chapel abandoned in 1345 and a 4th century basilica destroyed by an earthquake in 746. In 1920, during work on the foundations, a column was found 2 meters beneath the floor of a medieval Crusader chapel. Fragments of a magnificent mosaic were also found. Following this discovery, the architect immediately removed the new foundations and began excavations of the earlier church. After the remains of the Byzantine-era church were fully excavated, plans for the new church were altered, and work continued on the current basilica from April 19th, 1922 until 1924, when it was consecrated. So this church is from 1922-24. Now, this is very interesting, at least it was to me. When you walk on some places of the floor, it's mosaic. Much of it is mosaic tile on the floor, and you see it's very ornately done, mosaic tile. But then you come to these glass panels. This is a glass panel with a metal frame. And you see the floor design. It's about 1 inch or 2 lower than the rest of the floor around it. Well, what they did is when they were excavating, they found this 4th century basilica. This was this is the original tile work of the floor. So what they did is when they built the new floor, a couple inches above, they did the tile work to match the old floor. Okay, so under glass is the original, around it is the later work. I can try and close up on this so you can get a sense of the detail. I mean, these are very tiny pieces of tile which are done. I mean, you just don't see work like that anymore. Oops. So then, this is looking towards the altar, and while we were there was a Catholic service going on with pilgrims, and they must have been, I'm guessing, from Ireland, because the priest was, had a nice Irish brogue as he was doing the Mass. And this is believed to be the rock, part of the bedrock where Jesus prayed. Right there in the middle, in front of the altar table. Get a better view there. And this is one of those photos I nabbed off the internet because it gives you a really nice colorful view without people standing around it. This is another icon, mosaic of the Judas kissing Jesus with his betrayal. This is another look at the ceiling. Liturgy, Mass. So you can see how the icons are laid out as you look towards the front of the church. Some more floor tile work there. Okay, so here's another example of the original floor, 4th century floor under glass, and then the newer floor built around it. And then this is on the right, where the south side of the church is part of the bedrock, so you kind of see how the church is just built right on top of the bedrock. Another shot of the altar. Okay, so now we're outside the church again. Remember I was talking about that doorway, but it's really a window. This is the window, and then right below the window is more of the bedrock, and then you see a little, I'm guessing it's probably a bronze sculpture carving of Jesus praying on the rock there. Here's a close-up. So here's a little bit of the history about that I kind of read it in the short paragraph. And this I thought was helpful because it kind of helps you understand the layout of the church. So all the garden photos that I showed you with the trees are in this area right here, okay, to the north of the church. The new church is this, excuse me, bigger one here, and the Byzantine church is really kind of a little bit smaller around the same place. And then that even smaller Basilica of the Crusaders is this one right here. So it's a little smaller and it's a little bit different angle. And remember I talked about how the roadway is right in front of the church. Here's the road, and then across this way is the old city walls and the Dome of the Rock. Now it's also nice because this will help you, and of course up here would be the Mount of Olives in this area. This is also helpful because this is our next destination, which is also in the Garden of Gethsemane, is the Tomb of the Virgin Mary. So this whole complex here is the Tomb of the Virgin Mary. You'll see here there's a kind of a depressed courtyard. In other words, it's lower than street level. And then you see we'll go down many stairs into the ancient church or chapel here. So the actual tomb is well below the current grade of the city. And then over in this area is there's a convent, monastery here, and then there's another Byzantine area church. We did not go in these two areas. We only went in this area here. So those are the photos that you're going to see. So we'll get out of that. Excuse me, go to this. So this is that lower courtyard area. So up on top here, at the top of the stairs where this photo is taken from, would be the level of the Garden of Gethsemane and the church that we just looked at. So then you have to go down many steps into this courtyard, and this is the front of the entrance to the tomb, if you will. This is so you're looking at a different angle from the same shot or same viewpoint. You're looking in a different direction. This is a little bit different graphic of, this is the courtyard, this is the steps going down, this is the church, and you'll see the tomb in a few moments. But this also helps give you an elevation cross-section here. So you see here is the current street level, here is the courtyard level, the entrance is here, and then you go down the steps, and here's the tomb level down below. Okay?
Whose tomb is that?
Virgin Mary.
Okay, thank you. And our parents and
There's believed that Joachim and Anna's tomb is there as well. So this is another view from the street level. With the entrance again. And then this is not my photo, this is another one nabbed off the internet. So you go down the steps. To the right, here you see a little half entrance here. This is, as President Jane mentioned, this is one of, I believe, the tomb of Joachim and Anna, parents of the Virgin Mary. And then I think the tomb of Joseph, her betrothed, is on the other side, if I remember correctly. So you can see it's quite a ways down below. You went down into the courtyard and you can go quite a ways down again to get into the chapel tomb.
Are those Catholic churches or?
So this one, so the Church of All Nations, Garden of Gethsemane, is a Catholic church. This is Greek Orthodox, this part here. So another view going down, so you can get a size of the scale, a sense of the scale. President Jane is taking a photo there on the left. Tom Rudquist in the red shirt, who Tom, is very tall. It looks, this stairway going down makes everybody look pretty small. That's how big it is. So I believe this is either the tomb of Joseph, the betrothed, or the parents of Joachim and Anna. So the way the construction is there, it's like, why would they build this thing with this big archway in the middle of the stairs? Well, because this probably was, at one time, this was the level of this general street or walkways. Right? So it's kind of, again, if you may remember me talking about the layering of civilization in the Holy Land, things are built upon one another, primarily because when conquests came or earthquakes came and things were destroyed, they didn't clean it up and start over, they just built on top of what was there. And then there's the excavations later that revealed what was below. Again, another view going down the steps, getting closer to the bottom. See all the candili, the oil lamps hanging from the ceiling, they're everywhere. Probably hundreds of them. So now you're on the bottom level, and you're actually looking at the tomb of the Virgin Mary. Okay, you're looking, so this is a little entrance into the tomb here, and then there's a little kneeler with an altar, kind of an altar here. Again, notice all the lamps hanging. This is a close-up, so you can see the entrance here. You can see that entrance is a little smaller. You have to stoop down to enter. And then, I don't know if you remember me talking about this sign or symbol here. It's a Greek words taf. Excuse me, Greek letters taf, T, and phi, which means phylakes, tafu, the protectors of the tomb. So it's the sign of the Greek Brotherhood of the Holy Sepulchre, the Greek Orthodox order that controls all the holy sites in the Holy Land, or all the Greek Orthodox sites. Another view. Okay, so getting closer here, this actually is, I believe, from the other side, or a different, so you walk in one way and you walk out another way. So I believe you walk in from this side on the far corner, and then you walk out from there. And as you look, there's a kind of a flat surface, altar maybe, if you will. And there's a glass panel below, and it's that area underneath that is the actual tomb. And this is kind of looking underneath, you're looking kind of long ways into the tomb. Another one. So people throw names of people to be prayed for. Sometimes people throw money in there. That's all, but this is without any of that. Now, if you go behind the actual tomb, there's a throne, if you will. This could have been the seat throne of the church. I believe this is a big chapel or church down here at the bottom. So this could have been the seat throne, the bishop's throne. I'd be in the back of the altar. Not positive about that, but I'm guessing. And then there's, of course, an icon of the Virgin Mary there. This is, you can kind of see how the ceiling is. My guess is when this was originally a church, it was probably covered with ornate icons, mosaics, but over the years, those have come off or were destroyed at one point.
So this church is about how old?
So, a good question. Let me just read a little bit about the Virgin Mary's tomb. The Church of the Holy Sepulchre of St. Mary, a Christian tomb in the Kidron Valley at the foot of the Mount of Olives in Jerusalem, believed by Eastern Christians to be the burial place of Mary, the mother of Jesus. The sacred tradition of Eastern Christianity teaches the Virgin Mary died a natural death, and then her soul was received by Christ, and her body was assumed into heaven the third day after her repose. Okay. In 1972, Bellarmino Bagatti, a Franciscan friar and archaeologist, excavated the site and found evidence of an ancient cemetery dating to the 1st century. His findings have not yet been subject to peer review by the wider archaeological community. Bagatti interpreted the remains to indicate that the cemetery's initial structure consisted of 3 chambers, the actual tomb being the inner chamber of the whole complex. Later, the tomb interpreted by local Christians to be that of Mary's was isolated from the rest of the necropolis by cutting the surrounding rock face away from it. Okay, so remember, it was kind of like Jesus' tomb was in a cave. Well, it's really not longer a cave anymore, it's the edicule, because all of the rock surrounding his tomb was excavated away. So that's kind of what they're saying, the same thing with Mary here, and all you have left is her edicule in her, the church of her Dormition. A small upper church on an octagonal footing, meaning 8-sided, was built by Patriarch Juvenali over the location in the 5th century. This was destroyed in the Persian invasion of 614. During the following centuries, the church was destroyed and rebuilt many times, but the crypt was left untouched. As for Muslims, it is the burial place of the mother of the prophet Isa, Jesus. So in other words, they consider it the same. It was rebuilt in 1130 by the Crusaders, who installed a walled Benedictine monastery, the Abbey of St. Mary in the Valley of Jehoshaphat. The church is sometimes mentioned as the shrine of Our Lady of Josaphat. The monastic complex included early Gothic columns, red on green frescoes, and 3 towers for protection. The staircase and entrance were also part of the Crusaders' church. This church was destroyed by Saladin, a Muslim conqueror, in 1187, but the crypt was still respected. all that was left was the south entrance and staircase. Okay, in other words, so what we're looking at is all that's left of the Crusader church. The masonry of the upper church being used to build the walls of Jerusalem. So in other words, they took all that stuff away. In the second half of the 14th century, the Franciscan friars rebuilt the church once more. And the Greek Orthodox clergy launched a Palm Sunday takeover of the various Holy Land sites, including this one in 1757, and expelled the Franciscans. The Ottomans supported the status quo in the courts, and since then the tomb has been owned by the Greek Orthodox Church and the Armenian Apostolic Church of Jerusalem, while the grotto of Gethsemane remained in the possession of the Franciscans. The grotto being that little area I showed you that were not able to access. Okay, moving on. You see there's a couple icons that are around the tomb. More of the oil lamps. A little different view of this looks more to me more like a proscenitario just outside of the edicule of her tomb. I can't tell exactly what that is. That might be a different part. So this is coming back outside. And this is the grotto that we did not go in. We just basically took a photo of the door leading into the grotto. And this is the convent. Outside of the convent, we were not able to go in. Just took photos from the outside. So this is a Greek Orthodox monastery that's right above the church, and right next to it is the grotto, or I should say maybe right below it, to the right, where you're looking would be the grotto.
Doesn't the grotto commemorate the place where the disciples would pray and fall asleep?
I don't know offhand. Don't know. If we were able to go there, I'd probably remember, but I don't. We were not able to go there. So here it says on the sign, Sanctuary of the Agony of Jesus Christ, Basilica of Gethsemane. So that's the end of that. So let's now move to the Praetorium. So again, try and remember in your head the map of the old city, and then this street is one of the main drags through the old city, if you will. This is St. Mary's Street, and then it's the Via Doloroso, the Way of Sorrow. This is the Holy Sepulchre here, and then all these numbers are the Stations of the Cross. Okay, now Stations of the Cross are not commonly commemorated or celebrated in the Orthodox tradition, but they're very prominent in Jerusalem. I mean, it's almost everybody goes to visit them or goes by them or learns about them. So the Stations of the Cross commemorate the various, the last hours of Jesus' life. So number one, you see here, if you can't read, it says Jesus is condemned to death. Number two, Jesus receives the cross. 3, Jesus falls for the first time. Number 4, Jesus meets his grieving mother. Number 5, Simon of Cyrene helps Jesus carry the cross. Number 6, Veronica wipes the face of Jesus. That's where the icon not made with hands comes from. You know, when Jesus wiped his face with cloth, his face was imprinted on the cloth and an icon appeared. Number 7, Jesus falls for the second time. Number 8, Jesus speaks to the daughters of Jerusalem. Number 9, Jesus falls for the third time. Number 10, Jesus is stripped of his garments. Number 11, Jesus is nailed to the cross. 12, Jesus dies on the cross. 13, the body of Jesus is taken from the cross. and 14, Jesus is laid in the Holy Sepulchre. So, as you may have realized, that 10 through 14 are all within the Church of the Holy Sepulchre. We're going to show you photos of each of these right now. So this is the where they ecco homo, behold the man in Latin. Pilate questions Jesus. I find no wrong in him. Behold the man. He says. This arch here, this is called the ecco homo arch. Now this was probably at that time was considered to be 3 arches leading into either into that part of the city or into the, I don't know if it was considered to be where the Antonia fortress was at the time. But anyways, this archway would kind of signal to you this is where the Via Dolorosa, the Way of Sorrow, begins, and the first and second stations of the cross, and the Praetorium, the prison of Christ. So Philarchi tu Christu, prison of Christ. To Praetorium. See, there it was. This particular part was built and dedicated in 1906. What kind of struck me is the kind of the primitive nature of these signs. They look like they're kind of hand painted, but not kind of like an artist would do it. It seems somewhat crude, but I'm not sure why. So here it says in Greek, Eleni Orthodox, Greek Orthodox, Patriarchian of Jerusalem, Hieranoni Praetoriu, sorry, Holy Monastery of the Praetorium. And this is all in Latin. So you have to remember this stuff is like right next to each other. So there's a church that's owned by the Catholics, right next to the monastery that's controlled by the Greeks, I mean, literally on top of each other. So as you go inside in the Praetorium, which is controlled by the Greek Orthodox, I'm sorry, I'm sorry. I don't know how I got ahead of myself here. Stations of the Cross. Okay, sorry about that. So we're doing the Praetorium last, now we're doing the Stations of the Cross. So this plaque tells a little bit about the Way of the Cross, and the present round was crystallized during the 16th century and subsequently only slightly modified. So this is the first station where Jesus was condemned to death. This is the Church of the Flagellation. It was originally built by the Crusaders in the 12th century. It was then deserted for many centuries. And then in 1838, it was purchased by the Franciscans, was opened again for worship. And in 1929, the architect Antonio Barluzzi, who was a famous Italian architect who did many churches in the Holy Land, restored the church, preserving its medieval style. So Jesus condemned to death here. This is the courtyard outside the church, and then you just go across the way, and you enter into the chapel of the condemnation. Rebuilt, in 1904, over the ruins of medieval chapel, discovered years earlier. This is the outside of the church. So Station 1 and Station 2 are right next to each other, but they're two different churches. They're kind of we might call them chapels. They're not huge. They are distinct places of worship. So you see in here statues of Jesus carrying his cross to the left. See a kind of a medieval style icon of the same. You can see how it's oriented there. Everything's in Latin. Just different views of the inside of the church. This is looking upwards. This is the floor, the original floor, the time of Jesus. This is believed to be some sort of game that the soldiers used to play at the time. We might think of it as tic-tac-toe or whatever, something like similar to that. And then you're on to station 3, which is Jesus falls for the first time. You see the kind of the carved relief there of him falling with his cross on his back. And then inside, you peer inside, it's a very small chapel, and you see a statue with a painting behind it of the same. On to station 4, where Jesus meets his mother. You can see that in carved relief. So these are probably bronze discs or some sort of metallic discs. They all look the same. They mark with different numbers, mark the different stations. So again, small chapel. Looking inside, you see a statue of Jesus meeting his mother. And then on to station 5, which is Simon of Cyrene, helps Jesus carry his cross. Again, notice the archway, probably the original entryway, and then it was blocked up, and then you have another door later that was installed there. And then you notice these symbols of the cross here. One big cross and 4 crosses around it. That's very common. It's kind of considered to be the cross of Jerusalem or the cross of the Holy Land. So you see it all over there. I think this is the inside of Simon of Cyrene, carrying Jesus, the inside of that chapel. Then you're on to 6. Veronica wipes the face of Jesus. Notice this old pillar kind of in the middle of a newer wall. Again, rebuilding on top of things, around things, preserving things that have significance, historical or holy. Like there you have the icon, not made without hands, where it typically just shows Jesus' face, no neck or body below. Also called the Holy Mandilium. Number 7 is Jesus falls for the second time. Inside, again, these are very small chapels. Number 8, Jesus meets the women of Jerusalem. And there's a cross stone here in the wall. So you better look at it. That's, see the very typical for us Orthodox. You see the cross with IC, Nika around it. You're on to number 9. Jesus falls for the third time. Now you're getting very close to the Holy Sepulchre. Number 10, this is, I don't know if you remember the photos from the presentation on the Sepulchre, this is right outside the main entrance. There's those steps that go up, and then this little area, this is probably a specially constructed little chapel over this site, which is where Jesus is stripped of his garments. Then you go inside the Holy Sepulchre. Remember Golgotha? When you go inside, you go up the stairs, and you're at the Chapel of Golgotha. Just to the right of the Chapel of Golgotha is this side altar where Jesus is nailed to the cross, number 11. Then all you have to do is look to your left. It's right next to it, is the actual site of Golgotha where Jesus is crucified and on the cross, dies on the cross here. So this kind of gives you an idea of what it looks like looking back. So in the middle, Golgotha to the right, you can see that same icon of Jesus nailed to the cross lying on the ground, in the background, in this area right here. Remember the glass covering this whole area of the rock of Golgotha? And then you could, underneath the altar, you can put your hand in the hole and actually touch the rock. And number 13 is the stone of the anointing, where Jesus was unnailed from the cross, if you will, taken off the cross. Remember I talked about how that stone is still very fragrant with the myrrh smell. And then, of course, the Holy Edicule, where Jesus is laid in the tomb, the 14th station. Okay, so now let's go to the Praetorium. So the Praetorium is between the first and the second stations, right here. Right in this area. So remember I talked about the Acquomo Arch, talked about the prison, the Praetorium. Okay, so now we're inside, and now you go down a little, you got to go down subterranean level. Notice the primitive nature of the inscriptions. So you go in, and then this is really literally carved out of rock. All these rooms and cells, caves, if you will. It's not built, it's not built like masonry. It's carved out of the rock. And it's very tight quarters in here. It's not spacious at all. And notice this icon here. Notice Jesus' legs. This will become apparent in just a moment. So you can see how small the passages are. You have to bend over. It's solid rock. It kind of gives you a very close, almost claustrophobic feeling. This is a picture I got off the internet, which kind of shows two rooms at the same time, or two passageways. I think, if I remember correctly, you go in on the left, and you're right where Jesus was held in prison, and then you kind of go around the back, and then you come out right, if I remember correctly. So this is where Jesus was in prison. Now you notice again the same thing with his legs and his feet here. And notice the two holes right here and here. So in other words, he was made to sit in this area with his legs through these holes, and then his legs were bound, chained beneath. So there's no way for him to escape from this stock, if you will. But again, you can see how it's all carved out of solid rock. Now, so you go past that and you go to another area, and I don't know if you can read the Greek there, but it's the what does the Russian say? Oh, I'm sorry. It says in English there. I didn't see it. So the prison of the thieves in Barabbas, right? So this is where Barabbas was held. And again, you see how people throw money or whatever into these places as offering. And this is that floor picture of that game the soldiers carved into the rock. I don't know why it ended up in there again, but so let me just close by reading a little history of the Praetorium. So the Latin term praetorium originally signified a general's tent within a Roman castra, or castellum, or encampment. It is derived from the name of one of the chief Roman magistrates, the praetor, or means leader. It was originally the title of the highest ranking civil servant in the Roman Republic, but later became a position directly below the rank of the consul. In the New Testament, Praetorian refers to the palace of Pontius Pilate, the Roman prefect of Judea, which is believed to have been in one of the residential palaces built by Herod the Great for himself in Jerusalem, which was at that time was also the residence of his son, King Herod II. According to the New Testament, this is where Jesus Christ was tried and condemned to death. The Bible refers to the Praetorium as the common hall, or the governor's house, the judgment hall, Pilate's house, and the palace in various places. So I think we'll close there, and if we have a couple minutes for questions, if anybody has any. Question?
Is there any icon that we consider miracle icon of the chapels?
The question is are there any miracle working icons in all the different chapels of the Stations of the Cross? I'm not aware of any, but that doesn't mean there aren't any. At least they weren't pointed out to us that I remember. But my guess is for all the pilgrims that have visited there and prayed there, I bet they have, many miracles have been worked at those various chapels. Any other questions? I hope this was a little more helpful last time. I was not organized like I wanted to be. Hopefully this time it was a little more organized and helpful. So thank you, and please join us this Friday for our Lenten retreat with Bobby Maddox, and that Friday and Saturday. And also we're hosting the Pan-Orthodox Lenten Vespers on Sunday afternoon. So let's close with a prayer. In the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit, amen. The Lord and Master of my life, take from me the spirit of sloth, faint-heartedness, lust of power, and idle talk, but rather give to me your servant a spirit of chastity, humility, patience, and love. Yes, O Lord and King, grant me to see my own faults and not to judge my brother or sister, for you are holy and always now and forever and to the ages of ages. Amen. Have a good night. Blessed night.